Wow. It's great to be back at the CUFI Summit, and it's especially gratifying to see the torch being passed on to the next generation. How about another round of applause for the nearly 500 students who are here today? For decades, America has been the backbone of Israel's support in the world. Well, the backbone of that backbone is the support of millions of devout Christians across this great country. More than any other Christian organization, CUFI works year after year to make that backbone stronger and straighter than ever. You know, Christian support for Israel in America today is so strong that some may believe it's always been there, but it hasn't. For most of the past 20 centuries, the relationship between Christians and Jews was too often marked by enmity. And for much of American history, ties between Christians and Jews were influenced by that long-standing enmity. So too, in the first decades of Israel's statehood, were attitudes towards the Jewish state. But in recent decades, Christians and Jews have formed deep bonds of friendship, and attitudes towards the Jewish state have undergone a remarkable transformation. This transformation didn't happen on its own. It happened because of the moral clarity and leadership of a precious few who made it happen. And the Hagis are the most precious of all. Pastor Hagee and Diana, the Jewish people and the Jewish state owe you both a profound debt of gratitude. May you and your family be blessed for generations and generations to come. Today, it is also commonplace to see American leaders proudly support Israel and champion the US-Israel alliance. But here, too, there were trailblazers who led the way. One of them is another leader of CUFI, Gary Bauer. Thank you, Gary, for your friendship. Because of your efforts and the efforts of others, Israel has been blessed over the years to have many steadfast friends among American leaders. I want to recognize one in particular who is here tonight. When he was a congressman, Israel had no better friend. In every vote and every speech, his support for Israel was unflinching and unequivocal. When he was a governor, Israel had no better friend. He confronted the anti-Semitic BDS movement by signing the toughest anti-BDS legislation in the country. And in his current job, he has said repeatedly that if the world knows one thing, let it know this: America stands with Israel. Now, that would be an impressive statement coming from any American leader, but coming from the sitting Vice President of the United States, it is a statement of support for Israel that is unrivaled in American history. So please join me in applauding and thanking Vice President Mike Pence. Let me also use this opportunity to thank President Trump and his administration for the strong support they have shown Israel over the past 6 months. The impact of that support is felt in so many different places, but perhaps nowhere more than at the United Nations under Ambassador Nikki Haley. Now that is a Wonder Woman. With more and more countries seeking Israel's help in security and technology, and with the strong backing of the Trump administration and Congress, Israel hopes to finally crack the anti-Israel majorities at the United Nations once and for all. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight I'd like to talk about fake news. Now, some people associate fake news with the rise of President Donald Trump. But Israel has been dealing with fake news day after day, month after month, year after year, decade after decade. You all remember the fake news explosion that occurred during the war in Gaza 3 summers ago, when Hamas was committing a double war crime of targeting civilians and hiding behind civilians. You saw how most of the media showed pictures of Palestinians who were killed, but provided little or no context. They didn't explain that Hamas was deliberately putting Palestinian civilians in harm's way. They refused to report that Hamas was storing weapons en masse, firing missiles next to UN schools, and turning hospitals in Gaza into military command centers. Instead, fake news did all it could to cast Israeli soldiers as war criminals and Palestinian terrorists as victims. And it's not just during wartime when fake news surfaces. It happens every day in the war between the war. A few weeks ago, the BBC ran the following headline, quote, "3 Palestinians killed after deadly stabbing in Jerusalem." Now, one reading that headline might think that 3 innocent Palestinians were simply going about their business in Jerusalem when some fanatic stabbed them. Turns out that it was the 3 Palestinians who were the fanatics. They murdered a young Israeli border guard, Hadass Malka, and wounded others in a terror attack right outside the old city walls. The terrorists were killed because other brave Israeli border guards stopped them before they could murder even more victims. It was only after Donald Trump Jr. exposed the fake news headline in a tweet that the BBC was embarrassed into changing it. But when it comes to Israel's conflict with the Palestinians, these incidents are just the tip of the iceberg in the media's effort to transform lies into truth. For decades, there has been a systematic attempt to cast the Palestinians as peacemakers and Israel as obstructionists to peace. Fake news reports never mention the multiple peace offers that Israel has made or accepted over the years. In 1937, in 1947, in 1967, in 2000, in 2008, in 2014, and in so many years in between, or that the Palestinians time after time rejected every single offer of peace. Fake news always ignores the poison that has been taught, preached, and broadcast to a generation of young Palestinians since the Oslo Accords were signed 25 years ago. Fake news refuses to expose the Palestinian glorification of terrorists, the naming of public squares after mass murderers, and the ghoulish practice of the Palestinian Authority paying a lifetime salary to terrorists who murder Jews. Now that members of Congress, led by Senator Lindsey Graham, are actually trying to do something about this ghoulish practice by passing the Taylor Force Act, the purveyors of fake news don't quit. Just 3 days ago, this was the fake news headline of a Reuters story. Quote, Israel frets over Congress' push to slash Palestinian aid over terror payments. Frets? Ladies and gentlemen, I'm the ambassador of Israel to the United States. So my job is to speak for Israel in the United States. And I can assure you that Israel is not the slightest bit concerned that the Taylor Force Act will pass. Israel will be concerned if the Taylor Force Act didn't pass. Israel believes that the United States should end economic assistance to any government that pays people to kill Jews, period. Ladies and gentlemen, while all fake news is bad, perhaps the most consequential fake news over the last few years was the fake news fest that accompanied the Iranian nuclear deal. With rare exceptions, the media became willing dupes in a propaganda campaign designed to convince Americans that this nuclear deal actually blocks Iran's path to the bomb. A narrative was spun that claimed that a diplomatic agreement would help the moderates in Iran confront the hardliners and transform Iran into a responsible member of the international community. The previous administration built a so-called echo chamber that fed selective information to hand-picked experts who were then quoted in the fake news media as authoritative, independent voices supporting the deal. To sell this fake news, the administration relied on an ignorant and pliable press. As one former administration official would later boast, the reporters, quote, literally know nothing. Well, 2 years after all the Kool-Aid was guzzled, the results are in, and they are bad, very bad. Iran's regime is more extreme than ever. Iran's ambitions are more belligerent than ever. And Iran's dreams of creating a corridor of terror from Tehran to the Mediterranean are closer to being realized than ever. Iran already effectively controls Iraq and Lebanon. It now seeks to connect the two with a bridge through Syria. While many are focused on the immediate goal of defeating ISIS in Syria, Iran is doing everything to position itself to exploit that victory. Prime Minister Netanyahu has made clear that ceasefire or no ceasefire, Israel will not sit idly by while Iran sets up permanent sea, land, and air bases in Syria. Israel will continue to enforce its red lines, preventing Hezbollah from obtaining precision weapons and preventing Iran and Hezbollah from establishing a front against Israel in Syria. But what of the nuclear deal itself? Isn't that working? Wouldn't things be much worse off if that deal had not been made? That is exactly what was argued last week by the deal supporters who celebrated the 2-year anniversary of the deal. All the usual suspects were wheeled out to champion the merits of the deal and to claim that it's working. But ladies and gentlemen, what was true 2 years ago is just as true today. This deal does not block Iran's path to the bomb. It pays it. All Iran has to do is wait. In a few short years, the restrictions the nuclear deal puts in place will all be automatically removed. Iran's regime will be free to enrich uranium to its heart's delight, putting it on the brink of developing an entire nuclear arsenal. In the meantime, Iran continues to work on developing more advanced centrifuges and on expanding the range of its ballistic missiles. As sanctions continue to be removed, Iran's economy grows stronger, and with it, Iran's capacity to finance repression at home and aggression abroad. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are concerned about North Korea having nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles, you ain't seen nothing yet. Imagine Iran, the greatest sponsor of terror in the world, a country that vows to annihilate Israel and which has been waging war against the United States for nearly 40 years. Imagine Iran armed with nuclear weapons and intercontinental ballistic missiles. That is the impending disaster that this deal has set in motion. And that is the impending disaster that the fake news media still fails to report today. The Trump administration has been very clear that Iran must never be allowed to develop nuclear weapons. President Trump has called the Iranian nuclear deal the worst deal in history. Israel hopes that the Trump administration will decide not to kick this can down the road, and that we will forge a common policy that will do what is necessary today to prevent disaster tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, dealing with fake news would be bad enough, but Israel also has to deal with fake history. 2 weeks ago, UNESCO voted that the Cave of the Patriarchs was a Palestinian heritage site. You heard that right. The place where Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are buried has been declared a Palestinian heritage site. That's funny. I could have sworn that when Jacob was blessed after wrestling with the angel, he was given the name Israel, not Palestine. What a complete and utter joke. That the Palestinian leadership supports this theater of the absurd is not a surprise. After all, if falsifying history were an Olympic event, the Palestinians would easily win the gold. Arafat told President Clinton there never was a temple on the Temple Mount. Abu Mazen goes to the United Nations and denies any Jewish connection to Jerusalem. Palestinian leaders even claim that Jesus himself was a Palestinian. I'm not making that up. But while Palestinian lies are no surprise, self-respecting governments shouldn't encourage those lies or stand on the sidelines. My friends, the pyramids are not Greek. The Great Wall of China is not Japanese. And the Cave of the Patriarchs is not a Palestinian heritage site. Besides, Abraham paid good money for that cave 3,800 years ago. 400 silver shekels to be exact. You can read all about it in the book of Genesis, chapter 23. Maybe some of those clowns at UNESCO should consider turning off reruns of the Game of Thrones and picking up a Bible every once in a while. Ladies and gentlemen, Palestinian leaders and their fellow travelers falsify history because they know that even the smallest kernel of truth will collapse the entire edifice of lies they have painstakingly built to justify their ongoing war against Israel. To them, the Jewish people are colonialist occupiers who stole their land. To them, we are modern crusaders who, like the previous crusaders, will eventually be forced to leave. But in Judea and Samaria, the Jewish people are not occupiers. In Judea and Samaria, the Jewish people are home. This is the land where our patriarchs prayed, our prophets preached, and our kings ruled. This is the land where Abraham bound Isaac atop Mount Moriah, where David felled Goliath, and where Jeremiah prophesied destruction and redemption. And this is the land where a Jew named Jesus preached a universal message of love and peace that ultimately spread across the world. My friends, the people of Israel have been fighting fake news and fake history for a long time. Once we were falsely accused of blood libels. Today we are falsely accused of war crimes. Once we were condemned as well poisoners. Today we are condemned as foreign occupiers. But just as Israel persevered despite those ancient lies, I am fully confident that Israel will persevere in the face of today's lies, and that our future will be brighter than ever. I am confident not just because of an ancient promise that was made and will never be broken. I am confident because the people of Israel are strong, with a resolve that knows no bounds. I am confident because the military of Israel is strong, with soldiers who possess the courage of the Maccabees of old. I am confident because the economy of Israel is strong. We are a global technological power in agriculture, water, cyber, and in so many other areas. I am confident because Israel's alliance with the United States is strong and getting even stronger. And there is another thing that gives me great confidence in Israel's future. It is best explained by a story in the Bible, a story from the book of Exodus. It takes place when the children of Israel are on their way to the Promised Land. Despite all the miracles that were performed in leaving Egypt, the nation of Amalek, a nation that according to Jewish tradition personifies evil, that nation nonetheless decided to attack Israel. So Moses instructs Joshua to go out and fight them, while he stands on a hilltop, holding up the staff of God in his hand. We read that when Moses would raise his arms, Israel would prevail, and that when Moses would put down his arms, Amalek, evil, would prevail. So when the arms of Moses grew heavy, those standing by his side supported him until sunset, until the battle was won. Ladies and gentlemen, many miracles have been performed to return the people of Israel to our promised land. We have overcome unimaginable horrors. We have restored our sovereignty, ingathered our exiles, and created a remarkable, vibrant nation. Today, Israel proudly holds up the torch of freedom and progress in the darkest place on earth. And I know that no matter how heavy that torch becomes, no matter how much fake news and fake history we face, millions of Christians throughout this great nation will stand by our side and prop up Israel's arms until the battle is won. I know that together we will defend the truth, defeat evil, and secure our common future. May God bless Israel, and may God bless the United States of America.